Lights, camera, action.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast.
Hello, and happy Halloween.
Yes, happy
Even though-
belated Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of in between, which is a good reason, or it's a good thing why we did the Batman in 2 episodes.
Yes,
we
I
got
agree.
before Halloween and right after. So, happy Halloween.
Yes. I'm Emily.
I'm Jon,
And- go ahead.
today we're talking about the Batman Part 2. Last week we had Cole Molzer, first-time guest on the podcast, and we did an interview with him. We kind of got his thoughts on the show. Honestly, I mean, he interviewed us. I kind of sat there and wondered, man, like, this should be your show. Like, you got really good questions. So, Cole, thank you for being on our show. We really had a good time. We enjoyed finally getting to have you on here. So, thank you again. If you
Yes.
did not listen to that episode, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. But today, we're going to be talking about the Batman, just Emily and I, just the normal stuff that we do. We'll give our ratings, some production details, fun facts, all that good stuff. So that's what we're in for today.
Yes, we are. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start us off. So, The Batman was released on March 4th of 2022.
Our newest movie. I think this is the most recent movie that we've ever covered on the podcast.
Yes, I think you're right. It was directed by Matt Reeves. It is starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, I believe is how you say his name,
Yes.
Colin Farrell, Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, and Andy Serkis. It was distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 56 minutes. It's rated PG-13. Its budget was $200 million, and box office total was $772.2 million.
Very nice.
Yes.
Almost $1 billion, and that was honestly one of the first big box office hits post-COVID. And I think we talked about this a little bit with Cole, but it was one of those things that everybody was expecting it to hit $1 billion. It didn't quite get there. So some people were saying that it was a failure, but it made almost $800 million. It was by no means a failure. And this is one of the first big hits after COVID. So I don't think that that's any measure of success or failure. And honestly, I mean, I would gladly take $800 million. I think that's a very big hit. As seen by the fact that it got a spin-off TV show in The Penguin. There's another spin-off TV show in the works. There's the Batman 2 coming out.
What other spin-off TV show is there? I don't think I knew that.
It's not been announced yet. It's in the works.
Okay.
It was originally going to be GCPD, focusing on the police department. Then they said it was going to be an Arkham Asylum TV show, which is like a jail that houses all the supervillains of Batman.
Okay.
And now it's kind of in limbo, but they're working on it. It has been announced and confirmed that they are doing another show. It's just not certain what it's going to focus on, or at least it's not public what it's going to focus on.
Do you have a hope for what it's going to focus on?
I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on what we get in the Batman Part 2, the sequel, which is slated to come out next Halloween, actually, 2025. I'd be interested. I would love for it to be an Arkham Asylum TV show.
I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of the prison, and I loved the Arkham Asylum video game back on the 360, and just to see more of Batman's mythos, all of his villains. I think that would be really cool. So, but outside of that, I wouldn't care if it's something other than that. But yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I'll go ahead and dive into some fun facts. I probably could have made this portion 30 minutes long in and of itself. There was so much information. I finally had to stop myself because I didn't want this podcast to be an hour and a half long.
Yes. It's the same thing for production details. And that's part of the reason why we decided to split this up, just because this is a new movie. So there is so much information widely available that we kind of had to narrow it down and pick and choose. But also because there is so much out there, there's a lot for us to talk about. So we just wanted to let the interview be on its own and let us do our thing without it making a 2-hour long episode.
Right.
So anyways, please go ahead.
All right. So Robert Pattinson auditioned for the Batman using Val Kilmer's original Batsuit from Batman Forever. But because Pattinson's head didn't fit into Kilmer's cowl, he wore the one that George Clooney wore in Batman and Robin. But kind of coincidentally, I guess, Christian Bale also auditioned for Batman Begins, using Val Kilmer's original Batsuit from Batman Forever, too.
So he was in good company.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yes, I thought so, too.
I do know that Christian Bale reached out to Robert Pattinson and gave him a lot of tips.
Oh, really?
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's great.
I think Ben Affleck did as well. But anyways.
My next one is that Matt Reeves was really nervous about how audiences would perceive the detective story in this movie. He was afraid they wouldn't respond well to the complexity and that they would think that it was too long. But he didn't need to worry at all because the test audiences were really excited about seeing the world's greatest detective side of the character. And for people who aren't aware of the character's detective side, there are tons of great animated Batman movies that show that side of Batman to watch in preparation for the new movie.
Yes. Sorry, were you going to say more?
I was just going to say, which I kind of wish I had done that because have I seen any of the animated Batman?
You've
movies?
seen some of the original animated series.
Okay.
Because I have that on DVD. And you've watched some of those things with me. But we've never sat down and watched any of the movies or like a whole lot. You've just seen a few episodes here and there.
Right, because I mean, going into this movie, I was just accustomed to the Christian Bale Batman.
Right.
So it was a very new arena for me going into this movie. But yeah.
So I would say, and this is going to be maybe a little bit of a hot take, I stand by it like very much. But I feel like this movie, for me, really separated the true Batman fans from the casual fans. And if you feel offended by that, this is not a shot at you. This is not anything like I'm trying to knock you and say that you're a poser or anything of that nature. However, Matt Reeves' concern was very valid. And I would say that I felt like I wouldn't say his concern was necessarily realized, so to speak, and that it was a big problem. But I would say that was the biggest complaint about this movie was that it was too long and that people thought it was like boring. It was drawn out. I didn't feel like that was like the overwhelming consensus, obviously, because the movie made almost $1 billion. However, I've heard a lot of people say things to the effect of like, oh, well, it was too long. It was boring. There was no action and things like that. And that for me is very, I guess, frustrating because, as I said when we had Cole on the podcast, that's really not the core of Batman. If you read Batman comics, yes, like he is a fantastical character at times, and there are definitely action sequences, which you see in the movie, but the majority of the time is him being a detective, figuring things out, which is why I enjoy the character so much. That's why the Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight, all those games are great because you actually get to be the detective. But the ratio of like crazy, insane action to detective is maybe not what most people think that it is. And so that's why I loved and appreciated this movie. And I feel like I'm not trying to dismiss anybody's complaints about that or their opinions. However, I just feel like, again, a little bit of a hot take here. This really kind of separated maybe some of the true fans of the character.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Ooh. Oh, good.
My next fact. I think everybody knows that Colin Farrell wears makeup and a fat suit in this movie.
Yes.
So that's not my fact. But I wanted to kind of dive into the whole process. So it took 8 hours to complete his full, I guess, transition into the role of the Penguin.
Yes.
The facial prosthetics were comprised of 6 pieces. And in order to ensure that there were no like visible seams, the crew members would shine harsh flashlights in his face before approving him to go to set. And then when the production went into lockdown due to the pandemic, Pharrell got really into working out, and the costume team kept having to resize his fat suit. And they even came to his house one time to say, Colin, you have to stop working out. So
that's pretty cool. And I know we talked about it a little bit, but Colin Farrell's performance in this movie is outstanding.
amazing.
It's phenomenal. The makeup department did a ridiculously amazing job. Not just for him, but I think it shines the most in regards to all the prosthetics that they did for him. Man, it is so fantastic. So much so that he got his own series, and I just think that is so cool. I love that he was able to bring enough gravity to the role, enough nuance, that he was able to get his own show. Because in reality, like that's part of what makes Batman such a fun character, is that he has a really good, diverse group of villains who they themselves are like very interesting as well. So anyways.
My next fact is still on the Penguin. So Warner Bros. Would not let the Penguin smoke. Apparently Colin Farrell like fought to be able to smoke.
Yeah.
Because like in the comics, the Penguin is a smoker.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
And he even smoked in the Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah. In most depictions, he smokes. He usually has a cigar or like a really fancy cigarette, like the ones that were like the
Really
long
long.
stick. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't find a reason for why they wouldn't let him, but they
I
said
don't
no.
know. That seems like an odd like thing to dictate,
I know. I thought the same thing.
especially because like he's not a redeeming character.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's very much intentionally a villain. They're not trying to even make him an anti-hero. So I don't know. That seems very odd to me.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
My next fact is that Robert Pattinson's Batman voice was so bad, he was asked to change it. He explained that because all of the other actors had in a different direction and do something completely original, so he was basically saying all of his lines in a whisper voice.
Okay.
But they did not like that, which I think the voice he uses is very good, so I'm glad they changed the direction.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, I don't know. I think you can maybe see some of that still come out where it's like a whisper, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
And I don't have any issue with that. I thought his Batman voice was good in the movie.
Yeah, I did too. Next, Robert Pattinson didn't know that Batman was also known as the world's greatest detective, and he felt like an idiot when he found out. But given that none of the previous movies delve into that aspect of the character, like we were talking about earlier, it's easy to make that mistake.
Oh, yeah. It's very easily mistaken when it's not something anybody has focused on, which is such a great aspect of the character. I know I said it when we had Cole here, but I will say it again. Like, if you're interested, go read Batman and the Court of Owls. Like, that is a great saga as far as like him being a detective, and there's a bunch of other stuff along those lines. Most any Batman comic that you pick up is going to delve into that. And I just felt like that comic in particular came to life in this movie, and it wasn't even that storyline or those villains or anything like that. So anyways, I love that.
So my next one is that this is the first version of Batman to address the black eye makeup under the mask directly. In previous films, the makeup kind of just disappeared when Bruce took his mask off. And Matt Reeves, this is a quote from him. He said, "I just love the idea of taking off the mask, and under that, there's the sweating and the dripping and the whole theatricality of becoming this character."
Yeah, I like that they finally included it, that they made it like canonically a part of the character. I don't necessarily like, I'm not saying that like, yes, that's what I want Batman to have, but when you watch, whether it's The Dark Knight or like Batman 89, Michael Keaton, or Batman Forever, Val Kilmer, Batman and Robin, George Clooney, any of those movies, you can clearly see that they have eye makeup on underneath their cowl, and then they take it off, and it's just gone. And it's not like a big deal, but like when you're able to use it as a story device, as Matt Reeves did, like that's fantastic. Now, if you asked me, would I prefer that or for Batman to have white lenses, like in most of the Marvel movies now, they're starting to make very comic accurate helmets and masks. So like Deadpool or Wolverine from Deadpool and Wolverine, they have white lenses on their eyes. And it was a really, really, really big deal in that movie, which I'm not recommending that movie. But for Wolverine to have a cowl that actually has, well, one, for him to have the cowl was a big deal. Hugh Jackman never wore the cowl, but for him to have white lenses was like a really big deal. The technology is there. It doesn't look jarring. It's not a big deal.
Right.
They're comic book characters. So if you were to ask me if it was my preference for him to have white lenses like that or to have his actual eyes, I don't know which direction I would say, honestly, but I think I would be very interested to see Robert Pattinson with the white lenses. But I do like that they decided to incorporate it as a story device, as a part of the actual mythos of the character in universe, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So Robert Pattinson's audition took place when he was in rehearsals for shooting Tenet, which we've mentioned several other times on this podcast.
Yes.
Still haven't seen it. I need to. In 2019. So Robert Pattinson decided to lie to Christopher Nolan about it, but Christopher Nolan was no stranger to Batman, obviously,
Right.
and Warner Bros. And he immediately figured it out. So I have a quote from Robert Pattinson. He said, I said I had a family emergency, and as soon as I said it, he goes, "You're doing the Batman audition, aren't you?" And when Robert was told that he won the role of Batman a day before the principal photography for Tenet began, Christopher Nolan actually knew too somehow and congratulated him, even though Robert Pattinson hadn't told anybody about it yet. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I read that Christopher Nolan had given Pattinson some pointers and insights and whatnot as well. But I didn't know that. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And then my next fact is just a quote from Robert Pattinson just on his Batman at the beginning of the movie. So he said, "Bruce is obsessed in being Batman. He has no desire to be Bruce, and he wants to just throw it away. He hasn't gotten over being the 10-year-old boy who, in his mind, let his parents die. For him, being Batman is like a strange kind of therapy. He thinks this is the way he can save himself, by living in this kind of Zen state as Batman where it's just pure instinct and no emotional baggage. It feels like he has a death wish going out at night. I always get the impression that he wants to keep recreating the night when his parents died. In his mind, every single person he is fighting is the person who killed his parents." So I thought that was just a really cool summary, I guess, of the character.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's cool. And you can see all of that play out in the movie to varying degrees for sure. But it's very enjoyable just to see Batman in this very early stage trying to actually figure out who he is, like the purpose of what he's doing and so on. Because I think like once this trilogy or however many movies that Matt Reeves does and with Robert Pattinson and whatnot, I truly think that this movie is going to be pivotal in developing what is going to be the best Batman on screen. I already really love Robert Pattinson's depiction. I would argue that he is the best Batman on screen, that it is the best Batman movie. But I think this is going to be like the core foundation of why the next ones are going to be so good. Because you already saw at the end of this movie that he realizes he has to be more than vengeance. But for the large part of the movie, you actually get to experience with him why he has to be more than that. So anyways, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, that is all I had for fun facts. So.
Okay. Well, as you said, the amount of information on this movie was insane. I could have probably done, honestly, if I wanted to, maybe an hour just on production details. So I really cut down, condensed, just kind of hitting some highlights so that we can give our ratings and talk about the movie. But production on this movie was all over the place. The Batman originally started out as it was going to be Ben Affleck's solo Batman film. So DC, like the DC movies, have unfortunately been on a very insane roller coaster, and I attribute 99% of that to Warner Brothers leadership, because they've never actually had anybody like Kevin Feige. They cycled through 5 or 6 CFOs that were changing things and making demands, and they were really just trying to play catch up with Marvel, and they never actually hit the mark. Not because DC's content or characters are too outlandish or too weird or unrelatable or anything of that nature. They came before Marvel. They, for the longest time, were the #1 comic book seller, even after Marvel came. They are obviously a very strong competitor. So it's not that their characters or stories are odd. It's just that they've been mishandled many times. So in DC's efforts to get things going, Ben Affleck was cast as Batman in the Man of Steel universe, all that. Henry Cavill, the Justice League movie, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, Aquaman. This movie, The Batman, was supposed to be Ben Affleck's solo movie. Ben Affleck was originally going to star in it. He was going to direct it. He was going to write it. He was going to produce it. So he was putting a big burden on himself for this movie. Unfortunately, Ben went through a lot of marital issues. He went through a divorce, and then he was pretty deep into alcoholism, and that inevitably led to a lot of changes behind the scenes. But initially, Ben, when he was planning all this out, was going to focus on Batman's more vulnerable side. They were going to set the film in Arkham Asylum, which that would have been pretty cool. And their goal was to create kind of a haunted, claustrophobic atmosphere of the prison, which also mirrored Batman's inner struggles. So it sounds really dynamic, layered, interesting. How much of that actually would have produced into something, I don't know. Joe Manganiello was also cast as Deathstroke, who was going to be the villain for this movie.
Would you have liked that?
No.
Okay.
Actually, I really would have despised it. I don't know. Joe Manganiello did a little cameo at the end of the Justice League movie to kind of get things set up that he was going to be Deathstroke for this movie. I just think it's bad casting. This isn't a knock against him in the slightest. I've just not really seen a whole lot of roles where I see him and I'm like, wow, yeah, I really think he'd be a good fit for Deathstroke. Not to say that he can't do it or that he couldn't surprise me. I'm sure that he definitely could, and I would want him to. But on face value, I'm not necessarily supportive of that casting, but that's okay. The plan was for Deathstroke to operate kind of as a in Joe Manganiello's words, a horror movie villain, someone who's systematically dismantling Batman's life piece by piece, echoing the psychological tension in David Fincher's The Game, which is not a movie I've ever seen, but David Fincher is a highly regarded artist in the film industry, so I'm sure that it would have been good if they were actually able to execute that. But after a while, and as I alluded to earlier, Ben was having a lot of problems in his personal life, so he stepped away from writing and directing. Actually, it was initially directing. He stepped down, and that's when Matt Reeves kind of came into the discussion of him directing. He met with Warner Bros., and they actually had a lot of meetings. He declined their offer multiple times, and he finally signed on. And he kind of told them, he's like, look, if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to write the movie. I know Ben's written it, but I want to do my own thing. We can set it in the same DC universe with Superman and everything, but I want to write it. And so they gave him permission to do that. But then as things kind of continued to develop, Matt said, hey, things are looking really rocky behind the scenes for you guys. Ben's got a lot of stuff going on in his own life. Can I have creative freedom to be able to do this movie? Basically, let me make the Batman movie that I want to make. Let it be a standalone film, separate from the DC Extended Universe movie film thing. And he basically told him, he's like, if you're still interested and you want me on this project, those are my demands. I'm going to walk if we can't do that. And they met his demands. They decided to move forward with it. And he was given full creative control, which I'm all for.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm very much in favor of that. So I'm very glad that they gave in because the final product is fantastic. But anyways, I thought that was cool that he kind of laid that out on the table and that they said, okay, let's do it. So as Reeves started working on the movie, he found inspiration in gritty 1970s classics like Chinatown and Taxi Driver. Both movies I have not seen, although I've really, really wanted to watch Taxi Driver. I believe Robert De Niro is the lead in that. So I don't know. Maybe we can put that on the to-do list of things to watch. But he said, in reference to those movies, Chinatown and Taxi Driver, that he wanted Gotham to feel like a character itself. Like a city that was decaying, falling apart, the worst thing you could imagine. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Moving on, while Matt was working on the movie, writing it, he listened to Nirvana's Something in the Way repeatedly, using Kurt Cobain's persona as a model for Batman, a reclusive, haunted character living in isolation. I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, Something in the Way is the theme for this movie, which is fantastic. I think it really nails kind of the gothic, I don't know, it just feels very authentic in the way that it's used, which I appreciate.
Yeah. I had never seen or heard that song before this movie, but now I feel like I've heard it thousands of times.
Well, yeah, because I've replayed it, or I've played it constantly. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I love that he used this as inspiration, especially in the sense that he modeled Batman off of Kurt Cobain, in the sense of a reclusive, haunted character living in isolation. That's Batman to a T. 100% it is, and it's not until later that he realizes that he actually can be more than just that, that he can actually enjoy life outside of just being Batman. But there are so many good core stories out there about how Bruce is so invested into Batman that there is nothing else outside of being Batman, and that he isolates himself from everybody around him, and that he's carrying so much stuff, that he is haunted, that he is almost like a ghost himself. So anyways, I thought that was cool in that regard. Reeves did look to the comics for inspiration. One specific comic that he kind of looked to was Batman Ego, which is a comic where Bruce faces off with a personification of his own rage and darkness. The story pushed Reeves to dive deep into Batman's psychological trauma, even making him emotionally, quote, stuck at the age when his parents were killed. So I know you kind of quoted Robert Pattinson earlier, kind of speaking to the same idea. But I really appreciated that too, just because that is a major part of the character's mythos, is that he has a lot of demons that he's wrestling with, and he's trying to figure out his place. And I thought that was really good. I'm glad he looked to that for inspiration. There were actually a lot of other comics that Matt specifically referenced in the movie. Matt Reeves drew inspiration from Batman Year One, The Long Halloween, and there were a handful other ones. I thought that I wrote them down, but I must have missed them. So anyways, there's at least a few that he specifically referenced while working on the movie. And then you already talked about Pattinson wearing Val Kilmer's bat suit. I thought this was interesting. Paul Dano, who plays the Riddler, he understood that the character himself was like a psychopath. He is a serial killer. He's not a normal person.
He did a great job portraying that too.
He did a really, really good job. He said in preparation for the role, he would study serial killers, which was oftentimes very disturbing material.
Yeah, I bet.
So he chose to read it in public places so that he could keep himself calm, feel like he's surrounded by other people, that he's, safe, not alone necessarily consuming that information. And I thought it was really interesting that as they developed the character, Paul Dano decided that he should wear plastic wrap underneath his mask, which would help protect against transferring any DNA to like the crime scene or anything.
Oh.
That was something he picked up from when he was studying serial killers.
Wow.
So interesting little tidbit that he contributed to the character in the movie. And kind of, I guess, highlighting his commitment to the role and the embodiment of the Riddler's obsessive personality and attention to detail and things like that. A few bullet points here about the Batmobile, or I guess kind of Batman and his stuff in general in this movie, his gadgets and whatnot. Reeves decided to base the Batcave on a private underground rail station beneath Waldorf, Astoria in New York, which kind of added to this air of exclusivity and secrecy, because that was a real thing in New York. Only the extremely wealthy and elite could use that, and this highlights that as well, that this was like Wayne's station. It was a special thing for him and his family. So I thought that was an interesting take. I don't really have a problem with it not being like an actual bat cave. I have mixed feelings there as far as like, there are people that say that's a make or break thing for them. I don't feel that it's necessarily as big of a deal.
Yeah.
As long as he has his place,
right.
He has his spot where he's able to operate and so on. The Batcave in The Dark Knight was a literal
cave.
No.
Oh.
In Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, it was an actual
that's
cave.
what I'm thinking of.
But in The Dark Knight, it was like this shipping container basement thing. It's not a problem, but it really doesn't matter what it actually looks like. It really just matters that he has his home where he's operating, that's where his gadgets are, the Bat computer, all that stuff. So I don't really have a problem with it. And I thought it was kind of a cool, different take. And really, I mean, I think the Batcave itself is fantastic. He has easy access to the city, which is the most important part, but it is hidden, it's secluded. He has the really cool Batcave in there, and he's able to get to Wayne Manor without really any issue from the Batcave, so it hits all the check marks for me. The Batmobile. The Batmobile was actually inspired by the horror novel Christine, written by Stephen King. I have no idea what that book is about. I have to imagine that it's about like a car or an animal or something coming to life and like chasing people, because that's kind of what Matt Reeves spoke to in reference to it. So anyways, I've never read it. I have no idea what that's even about, but the Batmobile specifically was built to feel alive and intimidating. Reeves wanted it to feel like it was a living beast in action scenes, and even adding sound effects that made it sound like it was growling like an animal. So anyways, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I really do like the Batmobile in this movie. It's not like necessarily like, man, that's the Batmobile, but it fits well within this universe and I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And then just the last couple bullet points. I know you touched on this a little bit. Actually, we've talked about this quite a bit, about Batman being the world's greatest detective. But this was a point of focus for Reeves because it had never really been depicted on screen. So he took cues from 1970s detective stories and added a noir style to the focus of to focus on Batman's intelligence. So again, that's something that I really appreciate. Thank you, Matt Reeves, for doing that, because that's what made this movie for me. And then lastly, I thought this was very interesting. Paul Dano, his Riddler costume was based on the Zodiac Killer.
I did read that somewhere.
Yes. So, I don't really know that much about the Zodiac Killer. I'm not very well versed in it, and I don't know that I'm necessarily wanting to learn a whole lot, but regardless, he used elements that he kind of took from the Zodiac Killer as he was learning about him, such as like using a face obscuring mask, kind of adding to the layer of his disturbed character in that regard. And one note on that, because the mask was something that he kind of took away from the Zodiac Killer, or took inspiration from and added it into this character. He was very committed to maintaining that for his character in the movie. While implementing it, he experienced extreme heat and limited oxygen while wearing the mask. He found it like very hard to breathe. So it kind of unintentionally added a very eerie authenticity to his performance in the film while recording. So I thought that was really cool, because he often does seem not panicked, but just like almost kind of out of breath, fighting for it. Like he's really intense. And the fact that the mask itself kind of contributed to that, I find very interesting. So anyways.
One thing I wanted to add, because I did read up on some of like the ties between the Riddler and the Zodiac Killer, and one of the like connections, I guess, obviously they didn't get this from the Zodiac Killer, like the Riddler uses riddles, but this is just a connection that's interesting, I think. So the Zodiac Killer also used like complex ciphers, and actually only one of them was ever solved.
Really?
Yes. And then I don't remember if I read this or if I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure, you know how at the end of when the Riddler is like live streaming that video of when he has what's his name with the rat thing? Pete.
Yeah.
When he's live streaming that, or takes a video of it or whatever, and he like signs off. What does he say at the end? I can't remember.
Oh,
He
remember.
says like his name or something, and I guess the Zodiac Killer did the same thing somehow, like when
really?
Yeah. But I could be completely making that up. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. But there were a few interesting connections there that I found.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know anything about that. So, well, that is all that I had. So that was quite a bit of information. We're actually over 40 minutes into the episode right now. And we haven't even given our rating or like really spoke to the film or our favorite scenes or anything like that. So how would you rate this movie?
I think it's up there for me. I would say probably a 92 or 93.
Okay, nice. So why would you give it that rating? Why is it good? Favorite scenes, likes, dislikes?
I mean, I really love mystery stuff, and I don't know why, but I'm like intrigued by like the like serial killer stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a abnormal thing.
No, it's not. And also your dad's a police officer. I
Right,
mean, it's kind
yeah.
of in your blood, I would say.
Yeah. So, I just like, I really like, I guess like we've said, just the whole world's greatest detective storyline that he's having to solve all of this, that it's not like we don't really know who the villain is from the start, you know, like it's,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, I really like that aspect of it. I do love Robert Pattinson as Batman. I mentioned in our interview with Cole that I was kind of like, I don't know if hesitant is the right word. Just like, I really truthfully didn't know how it was going to go just because I had only known Robert Pattinson from Twilight. So,
Right.
yeah, but I think he did an amazing job, and Paul Dano did an amazing job. I mean, the whole cast, I love the whole cast, and I truthfully don't feel like it's too long or drawn out, even though it is
No.
3 hours long. Like, I feel like they fill the time very well, and I personally just like longer movies. So yeah.
I think it's more so, what are you looking for? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, for me, it's everything I was hoping for. It's a detective movie. It checks all the boxes in terms of what I wanted in a Batman film.
Yeah.
But
And
if
you don't want a detective movie to be too short.
Right. And if you're just coming to, see some people get punched in the face and have some cool action sequences and, things like that, then
This is not for you.
yeah, it's not the movie for you. So it's a lot about, I guess, perspective and kind of like what you've already assumed about the character and things like that. So I definitely don't feel like the movie is too long. I also would agree that if you're going to tell a detective story, I'd rather it be longer so that we can delve deep into what's going on. Mm-hmm. So we have time to spend on this story. And I don't know that I would say it needed to be any longer, but it definitely shouldn't be any shorter.
Right.
All of the scenes feel meaningful. They feel important. They feel like they're adding to a very important part of the film.
Yeah, I don't think there's any scenes that I would say like, oh, like we probably could have done without that one, you know?
Right, exactly. Even, I mean, like the opening, like you're getting a lot of story.
I think the opening is crazy important.
It's, yeah, but the opening is just Bruce talking. I mean, that's really all that's happening, right? Except you're getting all this stuff going on in the background. You're getting all this story. Like, that's a perfect example of how everything is working together seamlessly, adding to the overall story, and you're just getting started. The first minute and a half is just perfect. I don't know. You know what I mean? That's a small snippet, but it's a great example. And just a sidebar, Batman starts his monologue Thursday, October 31st, which is Halloween. Halloween falls on Thursday, October 31st.
Or fell on because
Or
this
yes,
will
because
have
this
come
will
out
have come
after.
out in the past. So anyways, yes, I thought that was kind of cool. So not to get too sidetracked, but anyways.
So what's your rating?
Oh man, that's a tough one for me. I'm just going to say 96 and be done with it.
Okay.
Because I could kind of go back and forth and really split hairs, but I feel like that's a good solid score. This is a fantastic movie. I love this movie. One of my favorite movies. It feels extremely authentic to the character. I feel like it hits all the beats I'm looking for and hoping for in a Batman story. The cast is fantastic. The acting is fantastic. The writing is fantastic. The soundtrack is fantastic. I love everything about this movie. I don't know why I necessarily wouldn't give it a higher score. I don't believe that I have any complaints per se. But, I guess got to leave room on the scale. So that's going to be my excuse that I've used a handful of times in other movies, and I'm going to use it here too. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this movie, especially the cast. I think that they are what makes this movie so special. It doesn't feel like any one character is detracting from the other.
Right.
Everybody works together in terms of contributing to the overall story in a just phenomenal way. Each character was written really well. You spend a lot of time with each character. It doesn't feel like anybody's just kind of like a throw off. And there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You get to spend a lot of time with Bruce. You get to spend a lot of time with the Riddler. You get to spend a lot of time with Catwoman. You get to spend a lot of time with the Penguin and Falcone. Like, there were so many like important characters, and the Jim Gordon, who maybe got the least time himself, but a lot of his time was spent with Batman, which I appreciate. But yeah, I really, really appreciate that it never feels like one character is overshadowing any other character by any stretch. So I really like that.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Do you want to talk about favorite scenes, even though we kind of touched on it with Cole? I
don't know. I mean, I could probably talk about this movie for a long, long, long time. It's tough for me because I don't necessarily remember everything that we said with Cole, but I don't think that there was anything that I really left on the table that I was wanting to talk about. I'm sure I probably mentioned this in the interview with Cole, but I'll mention it again just in case I didn't mention it. The scene where Batman is chasing the Penguin in the Batmobile, they're having the car chase. The very end of that, when Bruce basically causes the Penguin to have a pretty intense wreck. He flipped 10 times maybe in his car, and he's laying on the ground and whatnot. And the camera pans. So first you zoom in on Oz, the Penguin, and he's like freaking out. And, not going too crazy, but like you can tell he's scared.
He is so funny in that car chase scene.
Yes. Colin Farrell as the Penguin is just phenomenal. He adds I wouldn't say unintentional humor, but very real world humor in the sense that it doesn't feel out of place. He executes his lines perfectly. He's able to add a depth and drama as well as having a little bit of humor. I very much enjoy him. But anyways, so after that wreck happens, you zoom in on Oz and he's scared. And then the camera changes. It goes around and it's Batman far off, pretty far off, and with a bunch of flames behind him, and it's just this black silhouette, and he's slowly walking towards the car, towards the Penguin. And I think it was maybe in slow motion when that was happening, but I remember when the trailer for this movie came out, that shot was in there of him walking towards the Penguin, and people were freaking out. And I remember one person specifically saying, that's crazy because that shot is usually reserved for the villain in a horror movie. And I was like, oh, okay. I've never watched any horror movies.
Yeah.
But they specifically referenced Halloween, Michael Myers, the killer in that movie, that there was a very similar shot in one of the Halloween movies. And I was like, that's really, really cool that they did that, because the whole point of the symbol, why he's dressing up as a bat and in the night and everything else, is because he wants to weaponize fear.
Right.
He wants the villains to be scared of him. And I thought that was just super cool. That's like, okay, something even small like that shot specifically is usually the bad guy in the movie. And this is being used for Batman, but it's because he's utilizing fear as a weapon to protect the city. Like, I thought that was a really cool, interesting detail.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyways, there's probably a lot of other things that I could say or contribute to the movie itself, because I have a lot of love and passion for this movie. I guess maybe one thing that I'll leave you with is that I remember leaving the theater just feeling overwhelmingly satisfied, happy, excited, because when I left, I felt like two things. I felt like I had just watched a Batman comic play out on screen, which meant a lot to me. But then also, I was taken back to when I was like a little kid. I felt like I had just watched an episode of Batman the Animated Series on the movie screen. Like, it was just a grown-up version of that in live action. And that really, really meant a lot to me. So, in essence, what I'm saying is that I felt like they were extremely respectful, authentic to the source material, and that they executed it extremely well. And I just have the utmost appreciation for the overall message of the movie, that in order to be a hero, that he can't just be vengeance, that Batman has to be something more than that. He has to offer hope to those that are around him. And I thought that was really cool, special message in the movie that is not left up to interpretation. It is very clear. And I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, I can't speak to most of that because I never saw any of the animated stuff, but I'll agree with you still.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to stop there because I could keep going and going. So, thank you guys for listening. We had a lot of fun splitting this up into 2 episodes. Something we've never done before.
Yeah, but I think it works very well, especially for this kind of movie where we just could talk for hours.
Yeah, it was really nice to be able to spend a lot more time being able to let our interview with Cole be that, and be able to do this and expound and not feel like we have to condense in any form. So thank you guys for listening. We really enjoyed doing that. And we hope that you guys will come back next week, because we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite movies of all time. I love this movie so much, and I think you could say the same as well, right, Em?
Yes, for sure.
Yes, so next week we're going to be talking about Wreck-It Ralph, Disney movie from 2012, I believe, if I recall.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's right in that neighborhood. But anyways, we're really excited about it. We hope you guys come back and listen to it. If you want to watch it ahead of time, it is currently streaming on Disney+. And with that, we hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
See you next time.
Bye.